Hello, 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 and welcome to this edition of A Quick Pint. Now, today I'd like to respond to a very interesting article in Aporia magazine by Noah Carl entitled "Surely Liberals Should Support White Nationalism." And my answer is that they don't do so because they need white nationalists. They need white nationalists to make themselves feel good, to make themselves feel morally superior. So we shouldn't expect them to be logically coherent about this. Now, what Noah Carl argues is that this obsession in the media with white nationalism began in about 2016 with the election of Donald Trump and with Brexit, but particularly with the election of Donald Trump. And then, according to Google Ngram, you see a massive spike in mentions of white nationalism and the perception of white nationalism as a threat. Carl goes through the data on this, and he concludes that people that are actually white nationalists, if this involves a belief in something like the voluntary separation or the compulsory separation of races, make up a tiny percentage of the population of the United States, at most something like 1%. And it can't really be used as synonymous with believing in the ideas of the alt-right, because there was a survey in 2018 which found that based on those ideas, more Hispanics came across as being alt-right than did white people. So you have a tiny, almost irrelevant percentage of the American population who claim to be white nationalists. And what exactly they believe is unclear. But let's say it's voluntary separation of races. Carl notes that if this is the case, then liberals are in many ways the ultimate white nationalists. If you look at the cities that are in the US that are the most segregated according to race, that is to say Milwaukee, Detroit, Chicago, New York, and St. Louis, or St. Louis, how you pronounce it, they are also very, very strongly Democrat. Data indicates that 66% of Democrats have all white friends, when it's only 73%. It's only 73% among Republicans. So really, there is almost no difference between liberals and conservatives in America in terms of all white friendship networks. And indeed, people who are liberal are more likely to have no close black friends than are people that are conservative. So clearly, people that are liberal do not practice what they preach. They preach integration, and they preach this idea of racial harmony and whatever, but in their own behaviour, they are essentially white nationalists. They create their own mini ethno-state where everybody is white, and they talk about all the terrible threat of white nationalism and white terrorism and all this kind of thing, and then they go back to their all-white neighbourhood at the end of the day. Now, the question that Carl asks is, well, why not let a few eccentrics have their own ethno-state in America? Why not let them do a kind of American version of Urania and establish a white ethno-state? Wouldn't this be good? If these people are inherently bad people, then it would be good for white Americans that they are not living among them because they're such terrible people, and it would be good for non-white Americans that they're not living among them because they're such terrible people. So why not let them have their own Urania? Wouldn't this be logical, particularly when you consider that white liberals are creating their own Urania effectively anyway in how they choose to live? And the answer seems to be no. It doesn't work like that. When we create a moral system, a system of moral goodness, and we tell ourselves that we are the most moral, that we are morally superior to other people, then, of course, in many cases, precisely because of the sort of arrogance, the conceit of that system, of wanting to believe that you're morally superior, and remember that there is good evidence that being extremely liberal correlates with narcissism, you will never quite live up to that. You will always be a hypocrite. And indeed, they are hypocrites because they will preach that there should be racial harmony and that it's white nationalism is terrible and so forth. But yet they, on the other hand, practice elements of it because they want to live for various reasons, evolutionary, psychological reasons or whatever, in essentially all white communities. And so how do you deal with that? Well, one of the things that you do, it's an age-old idea, is projection. You take the parts of yourself that you know are bad and you know are morally inferior, and you project those onto other people who you argue are even worse than you. And these, of course, would be the hypothetical white nationalists, this tiny minority who openly advocate for separation or whatever, which is something that deep down you want anyway, but you hate yourself for wanting. And so you project it onto them. And so you need them. if you let them go and have their ethno-state, if you let them secede from your community and not be part of your community, you can't really engage in that useful psychological mechanism anymore, which allows you to feel that you are morally superior. You need them. You need somebody who you can feel morally better than, and who you can project your own negative side onto, so that you can cope. And the evidence for that is very clear in England, that for ages the evil racist bogeyman was a party called the British National Party, and anti-racist groups would picket them and campaign against them and whatever, and then they were basically annihilated. And so then they turned their fire on a party called the UK Independence Party, which was far less right on. And then that party was basically annihilated. And so then, by the 2015 election in the UK, you had these anti-racist groups marching against the Conservative Party, and marching against their victory and saying what a terrible thing this was. Because you have to have someone to project your insecurities onto if you are liberal, and we know that liberalism correlates with neuroticism, and so people that are liberal ultimately have in many ways quite low self-esteem and low self-worth, and need to bolster that by projecting their feelings onto other people. And so that is why liberals are never going to, in Noah Carl's terms, support white nationalism. Now Noah Carl stresses that he is not a white nationalist, and he doesn't see it as a particularly good thing to want to be separated from people of other races. And I likewise have been quite clear that I am not a white nationalist, and I have no desire to be separated. I have friends and colleagues of other races. I have no desire for an all-white ethno-state. But it is. Noah makes a good point that it is logical that they should permit this, that they should want this. It makes sense, but this is not about logic. This is about people who are insecure and who are unstable in many ways, desperately trying to achieve a sense of moral superiority. And in order to do that, they need an evil bogeyman. They need a witch within their society whom they can project all their insecurities onto. And that, of course, is this white nationalist who Noah points out makes up a tiny percentage of the population. Now, ladies and gentlemen, before you go, I must tell you that tickets for my Liverpool meetup and for my London Christmas dinner are almost sold out. So don't miss out on the opportunity to learn about the Neo-Byzantium that we are building. Click on the link below to reserve your place there now. Are you ready for the future of the West?